Challenges.
Some people fear them.
Some run from them.
Others just ignore them.
We live for them. The bigger, the better.
Challenges are where legends are made.
Where character and values are revealed.
Leaders step up.
Teams are galvanized.
Brother and sisterhoods are forged.
And trust is earned.
Where innovators thrive.
Everyday heroes prove their mettle.
Dreams become reality. And progress marches ahead. We live for challenges because a better world doesn't just happen.
It has to be built,
He has to be powered.
Connected,
accessible,
Productive,
Sustainable,
safe,
Secure.
reliable, smart,
and equitable.
from designers and engineers to scientists and innovators.
field leaders,
and skilled craft professionals.
The people of Bechtel are at work every day.
Across continents, cultures, and industries.
Finding a better way.
Making the extraordinary possible.
And bringing a better world to life. We've done it for the last 125 years.
and we're just getting started.
All right, that's pretty good. Yeah. Well, that says it all. First of all, to Pat Tiberi, thanks for inviting us today, and to all my friends who are here, it's just great to see you again. For some of you, we haven't seen each other as much since I left. I became a refugee from public service. But one thing I did when I got out was
We granted him asylum.
yeah, I decided to try to go on the clean side and do some private sector work. So I was given the privilege to serve on this board with Bechtel, and it's been great, and that's why I'm here today. It is so cool to see this beautiful Intel facility coming out of the ground, and it's kind of the dream of the Silicon Valley coming to Ohio, and the heartland, Silicon heartland that Pat Gelsinger talks about, and the sort of the fruition of everything that happened with regard to the CHIPS Act is there. It's becoming a reality, and it's really exciting. When I think about Bechtel, I think about one word, which is integrity. I knew Brendan's dad well. I knew Brendan, and the work they do all around the globe, I think, is a testament to it. But here in Ohio as well, they've got a strong history. And so it's all about the exciting big projects you saw there, but it's also about doing it right. And I know our Ohio business leaders here, Brendan, appreciate that. So let's get into some questions here.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Brendan the toughest questions I can think of.
By the way, Rob, before you
I don't
start,
normally
I'll
get this
say,
opportunity.
as the former senior senator from Ohio, he makes a pretty good junior field engineer out there in the field, I'd say, based on our site visit today.
Yeah, I was kind of bossing around some of the guys today, telling them what to do with concrete work. It's scary. No, I really didn't. Don't worry.
It's fine.
It's going to be good. Well, let's start about talking about what's going on globally.
Yeah.
I mean, between the CHIPS Act and the infrastructure bill and the IRA, there's about $2 trillion of investments being made by the public sector, and the private sector is doing a lot more than that, as you know. It's leveraging a lot of funding. What's happening here in the States, what's happening around the world in terms of construction jobs?
Yeah, Rob, I would say big picture. So the global construction market is forecast to grow by 85% between now and 2030. Wow. So in 2030, it'll be north of a $17 billion market globally. We're certainly feeling that here at home in the United States. We're actually much more heavily concentrated from a volume of work perspective. Typically, historically, over our now 126 years, we're used to being about 40-60, 60-40 overseas versus domestic, and that kind of flip-flops depending on economic realities around the world. We're probably north of 75% domestic today. So as CEOs, I know it's part of our job to sort of complain about how it could always be better, but it turns out it's actually a lot better here in the US than it is in some other countries around the world. So that's really, and of course there's a historical level of post-COVID plus sort of stimulated CapEx investment happening both in the public and private sector. So all of our mega project customers in the private sector, first thing they did when COVID hit was put their big projects on a shelf. Not a great environment for making big, decade-long CapEx commitments. And then COVID opened back up, and pull all those plans back down and go execute. And then on top of that, we've had this triumvirate of really, massive infrastructure investment. And then you've got all the normal unassailable trends of urbanization. Every net zero commitment requires a physical reconfiguration of the energy value chain. You've got a whole lot. You've got the ongoing electrification and digitalization of everything. AI is fueling explosive growth in data center construction, which I know you all are living right here and now. So it's an exciting, thrilling, sometimes terrifying time to be in the construction business. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for growth. And I bet here in Ohio, having seen what this economy has achieved and is on the path to achieving, I'm sure you're feeling it. The enthusiasm for growth is very high. The reality of what's required to enable that level of growth on a sustainable basis, I think everybody's confronting now. And we're certainly feeling it from a workforce perspective all throughout the United States. I'd say particularly here in such a hot market as Ohio.
And I think every CEO in the room has the same experience of, the workforce challenge. It also has some really innovative ideas. There's a lot of great stuff going on. I know you're involved in a lot of that as well. Talk a little more about Ohio, maybe the history of the company in Ohio, and what you're doing in Ohio.
So I'm embarrassed I have to consult my notes for this, but I have to admit I only just discovered in preparing to be with you today that I'm a sort of kind of native Ohioan if you go back far enough. So it was my great-great-great-great-grandfather, so 5 greats, Peter Bechtel, who moved to Ohio in 1824, 39 years before his estate. He lived in Milton, which today is part of, I think, Ashland County, so about 90 miles north of here, I think. And then his son, Jacob Bechtel, grew up in Ohio, and I regret to say he moved eventually to Indiana. So, and we've regretted it ever since, if I could be really honest. And so it's pretty neat, actually, to discover that in sort of doing some research on our history here in Ohio, that I discovered that I knew we'd come from sort of, parts east and then Pennsylvania and then Ohio, and the family history sort of, then we started helping build the railroads as they went west and couldn't go any further west than San Francisco and set up shop there. And then actually one of my first acts as CEO was to unfortunately close that office and move up to the DC suburbs. But our work in Ohio started in the 1940s. So we built a section of the Big Inch pipeline that was bringing crude oil from Texas up to New Jersey as part of the World War II war effort. We then continued in the energy business here. We did some work for the Standard Oil Company in the 50s on their cracker in Cleveland. Then in the 60s, we did some work in Cincinnati on the Gulf refinery. And then 1970s, we designed and built Davis-Besse up near Lake Erie, which many of you would be familiar with. We also helped in the 70s with the DOE's centrifuge refining project in Portsmouth. In the 2010s, as we've done for most of the 80% of the nukes in the U.S. that we had something to do with, went back and did a life extension, 2 steam generator replacements, first of a kind reactor pressure vessel replacement, did some sort of clean air control work at Samus. And then in the 2010s, the Carroll County Combined Cycle Power Plant, which powers about 750,000 homes. And then the 2020s, we did the Southfield Energy Project in Columbiana County, which was our most recent project. And I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to say, since it's public knowledge, that we are working on a little semiconductor project just down the road.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your commitment to Ohio and your continued commitment. Let's talk a little about the supply chain in Ohio. Yeah. Part of what you're talking about today, I understand, is supply chain and some of the challenges that all of you feel. And since the COVID period and post-COVID, it's been tough. But tell us about what you're doing in Ohio in terms of this little Intel project you mentioned.
Yeah.
How's the supply chain?
So the supply chain's been great. We always want to maximize our local spend, our local content, our engagement of great local contractors and resources in the project. It just makes good sense. It's about being a good neighbor, and typically it has a more competitive outcome as well. So we're really excited about that. I will say, and of course, I think the growth that's happening in Ohio right now, I've mentioned, it's putting a lot of stress on the workforce. And I think one of the things that, having spent the day with the team and just thinking about the work ahead of us, it's something that I think we as private sector leaders and employers need to continue to work with government, with academic institutions, with the unions, if it's union work, on how we're going to build talent pipelines to do all this incredible work that's been unlocked by 3 big pieces of legislation plus all the private sector investment. And I'd say that's kind of our main focus now, Rob, is we're ramping up and we got to find where all the people are going to come from.
These are great jobs, high-paying jobs, and many of you offer them as well, but Central Ohio is so hot right now, so it's obviously our biggest challenge, and I guess a good challenge to have, right? The
Yes,
alternative would
it's a
be
champagne
worse.
problem.
Champagne problem. So you talked about the history of the company a little bit. You didn't mention you're a 5th generation of leadership of the company, but I'm going to ask you a question that you're not ready for, which is, tell us about your experience with the company. I understand at your young age that you actually have about 29 years with Bechtel. And
29 paid years, yeah.
Yeah.
The minimum legal working age in California is 14, so I started at 14, working summers. My first construction camp job was at age 3, living in a trailer in the jungle in Borneo. That's in Indonesia, if you aren't familiar. My dad was a piping superintendent on an energy project there. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. It was me and my little brother. And when my mom used to give us grief later in life for having bad table manners, we remind her that our playmate in camp was an injured orangutan that our neighbors had. I was like, you did let us play with monkeys, so it's like really not our fault on the bad table manners. And then went from there to New Zealand. Dad was a superintendent on the first gas-to-gasoline project in the world for Exxon at the time. And then 3 years in London, started school in London as my dad was running our international business based out of London. And then moved back to the Bay Area and loved California, but left as fast as I could for field jobs all over the world. The highlight of which I think I was in a different place every summer from 14 till I rejoined the company in my 20s. And my as a reward for rejoining the company full time, the first place they sent me was the Congo River Delta in Angola, and I was a superintendent on a big energy project there at the beginning. So that was fun.
what was the toughest project you've had?
That I've worked on or that
Yeah.
we've done? That Angola project was tough. I was there from 0% complete to 40% complete. The camp that you're living in a construction camp, it got a lot nicer after I left. When I was there, it was pretty rough. The advice I always give young people in our business is when you're young enough to do it, when you're maybe not yet married with kids, it's a great time to go out. And I call it, you can choose to be a priest or you can be a monk and go monk it up for a while. And the steepest learning curve that you can get on is the advice I give everybody coming up. And when you go on one of these construction camp jobs, it's like living in dog years. You get 7 years of experience in every year spent working just because there's always more work than people to do it in. And if you do a reasonably good job, they keep throwing more scope at you and you learn a lot. And it's on that job in Angola, we had 6,000 craft, 3,000 of whom were international, and then 3,500 of whom were Angolans who most had never had a job before. They had just finished a civil war about 5 or 6 years before. And so it was quite an experience, but then we had about 250 staff on the job. And in the 250 staff, we had 42 different nations represented. So it's like it's like a model UN, but you're building something.
Yeah. A truly global company. So we're going to talk about AI later, I think, in this conference, and artificial intelligence and digitization generally in the construction trades is starting to come on. Can you talk a little about how that affects Bechtel and what you're doing even here at this site?
I think, to be honest, I think we're still figuring it out. I think any CEO who says they've got it all figured out, you should ask them, see if they're good for 6 questions deep on that. I think you'd find you'd get to deer in the headlights, but I'm good to about round 3, and I'm pretty deep on this growing up in Silicon Valley as a kid. I think that the thing that we're realizing, so we're, depending on the year, the biggest or one of the 3 biggest engineering construction companies in the U.S., and we're by far the most diverse and serve the broadest number of end markets and customers. And the power of the data that we have, particularly the historical performance data on how many hours does it actually take to install 20-inch pipe in this part of the country, in this part of the world, under this set of conditions. That is extremely valuable data for how you estimate projects. It's extremely valuable data for how you think about optimizing an execution plan. We had algorithms in senior superintendents and engineers' heads on the best way to sequence a construction project. We actually built our own in-house AI that can run thousands of simulations to find the optimal way to erect a steel rack and a pipe rack to get you to the best outcome fastest and safest. And it was really interesting. We actually did this like 2.5 years ago before it was cool. And we brought in our saltiest, most experienced steel superintendent. And basically, it was like the chess thing, right? Where it's like the chess master playing the AI. And the AI kind of beat the superintendent. And he got really pissed off about it. But what was really cool was he sort of looked at it and said, no way you can. Oh, why didn't I think of that? Was kind of and so I really believe that this combination of very experienced, it's like person plus machine is going to equal even better outcomes. So I don't think about it in terms of AI replacing jobs. I do think low-value jobs that are highly repetitive are the most at risk, but we're really thinking about it, how do we augment the experience and the judgment and the intuition of our really experienced people.
Great. I'm going to open it up, which I'm not supposed to do, for questions, because I see there's some interesting facial expressions out there. Like,
Going off
really?
script, I love it.
We're going off script. But while you think about your question, I'm going to ask one more, which is something I was really struck with today, is just the dedication to safety. I've been at a few of your sites now, and we talk about it at every board meeting at the outset, every meeting, in fact, that I've been to. And there's a lot of people here who are in that same safety culture, I know. But maybe talk a little about safety and why it's so important to you as a company.
Well, I think it's really basic. I think that, our industry, we're ashamed that our industry 30, 40 years ago used to budget how many people you would lose on your projects every year. And you'd say, well, okay, we're going to get better. We're only going to allow 5 people to die on our projects this year. And it's like, can you imagine? And I actually think, so when we were in Indonesia, my dad was a superintendent. Part of the plant, we were building 2 plants right next to each other, 2 different units. We'd completed the first plant, and the customer was starting it up. They did not follow the startup procedure. They blew up the plant and killed 15 of my dad's friends and coworkers. And that scarred him deeply. He had to call people's families, and he lost 15 friends in a terrible accident. And he sort of said, if I'm ever in charge of this company, the only acceptable number of accidents on a Bechtel job is 0. And so 35 years ago, people thought he was crazy. He said, we're going to drive to 0 accidents. Not just like deaths, but like 0 accidents. And this year is the first year that all 5 of our business units, the only way they could get better at safety is to actually achieve 0. So that was their actual goal, which is incredible, I think.
Yeah.
And so the next frontier for us on that is mental health. I think anyone who's a big employer, this is on your radar. I think particularly coming out of COVID. And so that's the next logical frontier for us to keep pushing the boundary when we think about environment, safety, and health, is that mental health piece. But it's just, if you say you value people and you don't put that first, then the way we think about it is this is someone's son or daughter or brother or sister who's entrusted to our care when they walk through the gate on one of our sites. We want them to go home as healthy or healthier than they showed up. It's that simple.
Bechtel's launched a major national effort on mental health.
Thank you. Yes.
A national effort on mental health along with the building trades, and it's really exciting. You've committed significant resources to it. I know that'll make a difference. Questions? Thoughts? Yes.
Thank you for spending time with us.
Brandon?
Really great stories.
Yeah.
Brandon Karras from McKinsey. You've been at the
Yeah,
helm.
good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks. You've been at the helm of an institution that's been a global leader for 125 years, right? If I got that right. How do you think about the next 100+ years and how you spend your time as a CEO? What are you going to change and what are you going to keep the same?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Brandon. I get asked a lot about sort of, what will be my legacy, and I find it a terribly self-important question. I have no idea. What I think actually doesn't matter. What matters is, all the people that have worked with me and us as a team, what do they think mattered? I would tell you we learned a pretty hard lesson in COVID that our ability to predict the future, even with all the private information we have from all the world's best customers that build big stuff, we still can't predict the future. And so we really came out of that and rewired the organization for agility is too buzzy a word right now, but it's okay. We can't predict the future, but how can we be better than anybody else at skating to where the puck is headed and doing that faster? And actually, I think it's one of the reasons we're doing this big project in Ohio. Decided with a lot of conviction we were going to enter this market. We thought some important customers were underserved by their current capacity. We put our best talent on it, and we gave them a license to go out and have the full backing of the company to see what we could make of it, and here we are. And so I think that's probably the single biggest. So I'm 8 years in as CEO now, which is incredible. I'm 40. I just turned 43, and I'm 8 years in, and inshallah, I have another 22 years before I officially time out. Don't know if I'll make it that long. It'll depend on performance and all sorts of things, but a pretty extraordinary thing to think about that. And I hope that when I hang it up and look back, that this notion of being, going from being like any big institution, we were about 50,000 people when I took over 8 years ago, and then energy market kind of collapsed, and then COVID and shrunk down to more like 25,000. As we're growing back up, we're really focused on how do we stay as nimble and agile as an organization that big can. And then the last thing is just the other big learning for us during COVID was that we could not have gotten through it without our people sticking with us. We had senior supervisors that were asking for pay cuts so that their pay could go to one of their younger coworkers who had just had their second kid and was trying to get through COVID. Extraordinary sacrifices and commitment from our people to help each other through COVID, like all of you would have seen, I hope. And then we also learned that our customers who stuck with us through COVID and found ways to keep our project teams busy, optimizing their projects rather than the ones that just kind of said, all right, enough, put it on the shelf. Those were the deepest customer relationships. So we said, we're going to focus on serving a smaller number of customers. We're going to focus on over-serving a smaller number of the best customers has turned out to be a great strategic decision. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon. Another question? Comments, thoughts? We've already exceeded our time, so we should probably get off the stage. But before we do, let me make one other comment. I talked about integrity at the start, and I do believe that's one reason Bechtel has been as successful as they have been. But when you look to the future, to Brandon's question, I mean, Bechtel happens to be involved in pretty much everything about our future in terms of energy, in terms of technology. There's a new plant being built in Wyoming. This is public knowledge, I hope.
Yeah, it is.
If not, off
You're
the
good,
record.
Senator.
Off the
We'll
record.
clean up behind the elephant. Go for it.
But I sometimes do this. It's called Natrium, and it's the Bill Gates technology you've probably heard about from TerraPower, and it's really exciting to me because it's a safer way to produce nuclear power, and actually ties to Ohio too. The kind of refined uranium that they need can come from Ohio. But Bechtel's there, and clearly the leader in nuclear power with the nuclear Navy. They just finished a project even a few weeks ago, really, because the second unit came online at Vogtle, which is the first nuclear power plant in 30 years. 30 years. They were the fourth contractor. They saved it. So that's just one example of many, and of course the semiconductors would be another one where they're out front on some really exciting stuff for our country and things we're going to need from a national security perspective as well. So it's fun to be associated with them, and I thank you all for letting us be here today. Brendan, last word is yours.
Well, I would just say, Senator, you just got a promotion from junior field engineer to junior business development representative. So thank you for that. We're not very good at tooting our horn. It's not part of our culture. I would just say seriously, it's a real pleasure for us to be back in Ohio in a big way. We couldn't be prouder to be back. We love the quality of the people that we're getting to meet and work with and get to call colleagues as we take on this massive, massive challenge. I think that video in a minute and a half encapsulates our culture. We live for the really big, hard stuff. It's sort of what gets us up in the morning. If it's easy, we're fine to let somebody else do it. We like the really hard stuff. This one down the road is a hard one, and we're really proud to be here in Ohio helping deliver it for this community. So thank you. Thank you for your trust.
Thank you all.